I'd like you to cast your mind to the future, the year 2050. And this is just 27 years from now. Do you envisage this future that we've been hearing about, a terrifying world where we're suffering from degraded lands that are burning, depleted soils, polluted waterways, and society on its knees? Or, like me, do you envisage this world where towns, villages, and cities are vibrant, surrounded by vibrant forests, open plains full of wildlife, oceans teeming with life, and because we've invested in nature, we've got a sustainable growth for our economy? This is the vision that I and my company envisaged in 2013, when we set the mission of our businesses to rewild half the planet by 2050. And this has really shown us a beacon of light to the things that we're doing now. So Ecosulis has been delivering nature-based solutions for over 30 years, some of the solutions that I'll be describing in this talk. And we invested, because we're a B Corp, we've invested in solutions that we believe will help the planet at this kind of scale. So we spun CreditNature out of Ecosulis in November last year. And CreditNature is a nature fintech business with the ambition of making nature recovery and rewilding investable. So before I explain how we're going to do this, let me just emphasize how dependent we are on nature. PricewaterhouseCoopers suggests that 55% of global GDP is either moderately or highly dependent on nature. And this figure's actually increased in recent years. It used to be about 48%. It's currently about $58 trillion per year. But when you look at this statistic and you turn it around, you say, well, okay, if we've lost 55% of our nature, but we've got 45% left, do you actually think this is going to be a flourishing planet that is full of opportunity? I think it's going to degrade into this world that Ed described that's uninsurable, burning, and full of war. So it's my proposition that we're actually 100% dependent on nature. As Hans mentioned earlier, people need nature for everything that they do. We need nature for the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the sustainable soils that we need to grow our food, even down to the advanced technologies that we're using on a daily basis. We depend on nature's bounty for all of these things. And the good news is that nature is actually resilient. It can rebound, and actually quite quickly. I've seen this from my eyes around the world, including here in Romania, where I visited the Carpathian Mountains, looking at the reintroduction areas for the European bison. I've seen it in Svanta Gorja in the Danube, where populations of Dalmatian pelicans and golden jackals alongside the mighty tauros have been recovered. And so we know that nature can be recovered and for the benefit of people. But it's also, as I'll explain in this talk, one of the most viable nature-based climate solutions. But before I come on to some of the solutions, let me emphasize the challenge that we're currently facing. So if we just take one aspect of nature, the mammal fauna, if I ask you what percentage of mammal fauna do you think is on the planet if we consider humans, our pets, livestock, the food that we eat, and wild nature? If it was me, I'd hope to hear a figure of something around 50% of the world at least is made up of wild mammal fauna. However, as you can probably tell from this image, that isn't the statistic I'm going to share. 36% of the planet is made up of humans, but it pales into insignificance when you look at the pets that we have and the livestock that we rear. That's a further 60% of mammal fauna on the planet. This leaves just 4% of all mammal fauna on the planet, 4% of wild nature. So you can appreciate this is quite an imbalance. And what I'm not saying is that we just do away with all of our livestock and just move to wild nature. That's not feasible. We need to transition. But what I am saying is we need to readdress this balance And we can increase the amount of nature that's out there, the large herbivores, and some of which in countries around Europe are being harvested for wild meat. But this meat is harvested in a way that has more benefits to us. It results in ecosystem services that we all depend upon. And why is this important? Well, since 1970, there are some stark figures about the impact that our practices on the planet are having, whether it's agricultural practices, habitat destruction, or use of materials for the technologies we use. We've witnessed, on average, a 69% decline in biodiversity since 1970. If you look at South America, the figure is even more stark, 94% decline since 1970. We're faring better in Europe. It's around 18% decline, and it's actually improved from 24% recently. So we're doing some good things in Europe. However, and I emphasize, the baseline was 1970. Humanity has actually been extracting from nature for a very, very long time, and it's at an extremely depleted state. Over 40,000 years we've been extracting from nature. So what do I mean when I'm suggesting that we can rewild half the planet by 2050? Clearly that's not a very long time from now. But what I'm emphasizing is that if we're in a very degrading state at the moment, but I've suggested to you that nature can rebound quite quickly, what we need to do is put the conditions in place that move from a degraded set of activities to a restorative set of activities. And nature is our best ally in this. We just need to give it space to do the things that it does best and give it a helping hand in certain situations. And if I can't win you over with the argument of why biodiversity is important for our future, perhaps I can present an economic argument. The European Commission have calculated that for every €1 of investment in nature, we receive 10 euros of economic benefit. That's a pretty good return on investment. So nature has an opportunity to provide for us. I might also present a climate-related argument. Research has shown clearly that restoration of certain ecosystems, you've probably heard about salt marsh, seagrass, kelp, and the carbon sequestration potential of those ecosystems. You might be less familiar with the idea that restoring keystone species at scale across the planet offers one of our most viable nature-related climate solutions. Just 5 land-based species and the mesopelagic fish populations on the planet have been forecast to sequester 5.8 gigatons of carbon annually. And so if we expand the opportunity for nature to recover, it can be a great solution for us. So how do we go about this? Well, at CreditNature, we're very clear that we need to focus on the current frameworks that are available. So the Global Biodiversity Framework sets out a target to protect 30% of land and sea. And many countries, 196, have signed up to this. It also sets out the ambition to restore 30%. So actually my vision back in 2013 isn't quite so crazy as it sounded then. We're now aiming for 60% globally. And there's a task force, the task force on nature-related financial disclosures, similar to the TCFD, currently voluntary but likely to become mandatory, requiring corporates and companies to report and disclose their impacts on nature. And there are new frameworks around setting targets, the science-based targets for nature, that can enable corporates to clearly report on how they're doing. But there's another challenge here. There's a big financing gap. One of the financing gaps suggested by the United Nations Environment Programme is we need 700 billion per annum to be able to restore nature at the scale that I'm talking about. But actually, if I reflect that back to you, that's less than 1% of global GDP. So it's not an insurmountable amount of money to raise. It's just the channels for doing so are not yet available. So at CreditNature, we've developed several systems. One relates to biodiversity credits, and another relates to KPIs for sustainability-linked bonds. And you can see the size of these markets is projected to grow significantly over the coming years. We also recognize that the solution has to be technology-backed. And we're working with Microsoft on an accelerator and have built a platform that takes in data from multiple sources so that we've got accurate reporting of recovery, whether it's from satellites, drones, from field surveys, questionnaires. We take the data and convert that into meaningful metrics that allow measurement of recovery to be demonstrated. But we also recognize that this needs to be a science-backed approach. Dr. Paul Jepson and I have written a book on the science of rewilding, and many of the science-based activities that we've designed into our metrics are underwritten with the science that's currently available, Earth system science. But we're very clear, we won't benefit if we're just projecting our own successes. We need to have third-party verification of what we're trying to do. So we're working with a standards agency to demonstrate that our approach is independently verified and it's not just us saying it's good. I've been talking a lot about nature, but in the project work that we're doing, it's very much about people. People are key and central to everything we do. All of the project work that we're involved with require us to think about how can we help people recover their community? How can we offer them opportunities for enterprise? How do we act in the context that's relevant to them? So this is probably why we're actually oversubscribed with landowners, communities and farmers we've got hundreds of thousands of hectares of interest in the UK and Europe. We've got millions of hectares of interest from Africa. But the money isn't yet flowing in the way that we need it to service the expectations of those communities. And with such a massive ambition, there's absolutely no way we can do it on our own. So we've been working with various initiatives, such as with the Scottish Government in the UK, to help them develop a voluntary biodiversity credit market, to help them close their 20 billion per year nature financing gap. We're also working with the World Economic Forum Finance for Nature Group, for example, who in the future are planning to host an auction of biodiversity credits to some of the multinational corporations out there willing to invest in nature. We're working with many intermediaries, and we're always looking for new partnerships as to how we can scale this offering at the levels that I've been describing, as well as working with pioneering corporations such as Robertson, a construction firm who want to invest in Nature Positive Future, and Aberdeen, a financial services company. So I'm hoping in this talk I've managed to inspire you to think about nature as an ally. We are nature, and everything that we invest in for nature will benefit us. So if you want to carry on the conversation with me, I'd love you to follow me on LinkedIn or send me an email if you think there's an opportunity to collaborate. Let's put nature first. Thank you.
Thank you, Cain.
Thank you.
With one minute to spare, I just wanted to really fast ask you. I've seen optimism and pessimism on both sides. What gives you optimism and what gives you pessimism?
So the optimism I have is we are in conversations with lots of corporations. We're in conversations with banks, investment banks, development banks, asset managers, the whole of the finance community. We are learning the language of finance so that when we speak our language of ecosystems and biodiversity, we can explain to them that what we do, we've been doing for a long time. It's not as complex to us as it is to the financial markets. The same way bonds and credits are not so familiar to us.
And the pessimism comes from?
It's inertia. I mean, I think fundamentally people are looking around, waiting for someone else to do something. But as you can hear, we don't intend to stand still. We'll keep banging this drum.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
Cain.
Cheers.